Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our CCIA Risk Management Committee's COVID-19 webinar. CCIA's Risk Management Committee is one of about a dozen committees we have here at CCIA, bred primarily out of the insurance, HR, and intellectual property committees. They've been working very hard the last few weeks as a committee in terms of trying to be a resource for our members and non-members alike during this situation we find ourselves in. So we definitely have a long, robust call today, so I won't take up too much of your time, but did want to introduce you guys to Josh Drayton, CCIA's Communications Director, to give a quick update before we hand it over to Wesley Hine, who will moderate today's call.
Thanks, Justin. So yeah, this is Josh Drayton. I'm the Communications and Outreach Director for the California Cannabis Industry Association. This year has really brought forward an issue that we didn't anticipate dealing with, COVID-19, and not only the effect on the industry, but the effect it's having on the world has been very unanticipated. So I just want to give you a few brief updates. Number one, I just want to highlight that the health and safety of our team, your customers, and the broader community is absolutely of the utmost importance to us right now. We definitely recognize that the cannabis industry and your businesses provide essential services to patients and consumers. And we're very proud that our governor has just acknowledged that, which happened on Friday evening. I do want to highlight a few things to you right now, which is that in response to the spread of COVID-19, the California legislature did vote unanimously to recess until April 13th. At that point, they will reassess whether they open back up the legislative session or if they further extend the recess. Rumors right now are that recess is going to be extended. With that being said, that will change the entire legislative calendar and season. That means that they will be reviewing prioritized bills and maybe minimizing how many bills they view this legislative year. We will absolutely keep you as up to date as possible on anything that's coming out of the administration and anything that is coming out of the legislature. So with that being said, we are communicating every single day right now with our membership. So if you're getting an email from CCIA, please pay attention to that. We're not trying to overload your inbox, but we're trying to provide educational resources that our members are putting together, access to webinars to keep you up to date and understanding how to stay compliant in this challenging time. And again, any FAQs, any updates that are coming out of our regulatory bodies, we're trying to get out there to you as quickly as possible. So again, do pay attention to the emails we're sending out. Go to our website for all current resources, letters that CCIA has submitted to the governor, any sort of information on the executive orders that have come out of the administration, as well as any guiding documents that are coming out of the regulating bodies right now. So we are still very hard at work for you. And again, I want to thank the Risk Management Committee for putting together this webinar and really, meeting this moment with real-time information that's going to help keep you compliant and know what you can be doing during this time period. So thank you. I don't want to take any more time, and I will turn it over to Wesley Hine.
Thank you very much, Josh. I'd like to mirror that. I hope everybody is safe and healthy as right now. My name is Wesley Hine. I am the co-chair of the CCIA Risk Management Committee, something I'm very proud to serve on. I'm also the head of compliance, legal, and government relations for Mammoth Distribution. So the fight against COVID-19 is as much about having actionable information as anything else. And that's what today's panel is about. The fact that the state considers us essential critical infrastructure is great. In fact, it's historic. you think about it. But it doesn't do anything for operators, their valued employees, vendors, or patients if those essential companies don't have products to sell, don't have cash to pay bills, and most importantly, don't have enough essential employees to keep operations going, whether because they're out sick, taking care of someone who is, or simply too stressed to come to work. Employers can find themselves stuck between the need to take care of employees, cut costs to remain solvent, remain operational, all the while taking care of themselves and their loved ones. There's so many factors. We've just been talking about them every meeting we've had with risk management. It seems like another labor law comes into play. Some of these have just been enacted. We're going to talk about those. There's also state cannabis laws restricting what we can do. And with all of this together, honestly, it can almost be paralyzing. The good news is that operators are not alone. We're all in the same boat. There's resources available to help, and we'll share as many of those as we can today. And as Josh noted, the Risk Management Committee is meeting almost constantly, and as new information comes out, we will be updating through the CCIA website. Our panelists have been selected from leading cannabis companies, law firms, and relevant ancillary services, and they're to help you cut through the information overload. And I'm going to ask each one of them to start off by introducing themselves, but also talking about some of the biggest problems. And let's start off with Catherine Gonzalez of Kiva. Catherine?
Thank you so much. Everyone able to hear me okay now? Fantastic. Sorry about that. So my name is Catherine Gonzalez, and I'm the Director of Human Resources for Kiva Confections. Many of you are probably familiar with Kiva, but we are a California-based cannabis manufacturing and distribution company. So we have about 270 employees in Northern and Southern California. And yeah, I feel like I've aged about 10 years over the past week, probably like the rest of you in dealing with this. So, so many problems or challenges come to mind when I think about, the development of COVID-19 over the past couple of weeks. I think my focus has primarily been on how to communicate with our employees, how to make sure that they feel some sense of reassurance that Kiva is doing what we need to do. We're operating within the guidelines of the CDC and also what shelter-in-place orders that have been put in place, but communicating with them so that they know that not only are we doing what we need to do, but that they feel looped in. So finding the right cadence, the right channels, the right way to kind of just keep everyone in the loop. And make them feel like, they know what's going on during this time has been a big challenge.
Excellent. Ian?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ian Stewart. I'm the co-chair of the Wilson Elzer Cannabis Law Practice Team here in Los Angeles. I'm also a member of our COVID-19 task force for the firm that we formed just in the last 2 weeks. And as you can see, I'm in the office today. We're maintaining a skeleton crew entirely for compliance purposes to advise our clients on employment issues and other health and safety issues, OSHA issues, et cetera, as they work through COVID-19. Wes, to answer your question about sort of what has been the biggest issue we've been dealing with, I would say of the past few days, it's been dealing with conflicting state, county, and city orders that conflict in many cases on what constitutes an essential business or an essential service. Unfortunately, there remains confusion on the extent to which Governor Newsom's order is a statewide order. Initially, there was some statements in the press coming out of the governor's office saying that localities or counties could maintain stricter requirements within their shelter-in-place or stay-at-home orders. Subsequently, there was an amendment coming out of the governor's office saying that it was, quote unquote, a statewide order. We still don't have full clarity on the extent to which localities can legally make more restrictive orders. And I think that this is important. So even though it's very good news last Friday, regard to cannabis services being designated an essential service, my advice would be to still, for those of you who are operating in various parts of the state, to pay attention and to look at those local orders.
Thank you very much. Lauren Spagnuolo?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Lauren. I'm an account manager with Work. Work, we are the leading provider of payroll and HR solutions for the cannabis industry. And I would say one of the biggest problems that we see our clients facing is remaining compliant with quickly changing federal and state laws related to COVID-19, keeping their doors open while keeping employees safe, and then also just quickly adapting and changing the ways they do business in regards to new COVID-19 laws. So what Work is doing to help our clients is we've created a COVID-19 resources page and a blog, and constantly updating that information. We've also released an interactive state-by-state map that allows our clients to gain quick access to information and state resources. So our main goal at Work is find ways to support our clients and find ways from a technology standpoint to also an information standpoint to get the latest updates out and just have those resources available.
Terrific. And Dee Dee?
Hi, I'm Dee Dee Kennedy Symington. I am president of Benesis Health Insurance Services and grateful to serve with these great folks on the CCIA Risk Management Committee. We have, I think, probably a sole focus within our organization on employee benefits. And among all of the committee members on the risk management, I think I'm the sole employee benefits voice at times. We have a great strength when it comes to both business facing and employee facing. I've been in the insurance business for over 30 years and have been working with cannabis clients for over 8. And I would say for us as a employer that needed to shelter at home, that, time has probably been our biggest challenge, and obviously the anxiety of watching the unimaginable happen and trying to transfer our operations to home, making sure that we're maintaining both HIPAA and cybersecurity provisions in each of those locations. We had a rough structure of a plan, but we needed to obviously implement and fill in all of the things that you never know until you actually are moving through that process. So transferring to a remote workforce has been a challenge for us. We then obviously want to try to project what our clients are going to need and make sure that we're able to respond in a rapid, accurate manner. And, I just feel as if it's kind of a bit of deja vu, because with the Affordable Care Act, with Obamacare, when it was rolled out, we were trying to work with a series of regulations that we didn't have answers to. We had more questions than answers. And this is so similar in that we get these big bodies of law, and that we need a little bit more time, but we're still expected to drive the car while in the middle of building it around us. But I am loving the looking around and seeing how our communities and our people are really drawing together and giving to one another, both within the industry, but also in our communities. So I'm really hopeful that our overall outcome from the COVID pandemic is going to be one that'll draw people together and help us see our similarities greater than our differences.
We're also seeing a lot, besides having more questions than answers, we're seeing a lot of conflicting answers. And so we're going to touch on some of those, but people need to be prepared. A lot of things are happening in real time. The difference between a state making a decision and then a local municipality or jurisdiction making a decision, there's just an awful lot of conflicts, let alone the difference between state and federal. I do want to remind people that along with the GoTo software, there should be a question box as an attendee, and feel free to go ahead and put your questions in there, and then the organizers will go ahead and try to put those in front of the appropriate panelist. So Catherine, I have a question for you. Let's delve in a little bit deeper if we can. As a cannabis operator, this past couple of weeks, some of the specific steps that might be relevant to other operators, whether they're a cultivator, whether they're a distributor, manufacturer, retailer, and so forth, frankly speaking, to remain operational, whether it's keeping morale up, keeping employees safe, preserving cash, and so forth.
Absolutely. Thanks for that question. Great question. We've been building, kind of like Dee Dee said, we've been building the car around us as we're driving into this unprecedented territory with this situation. So we've done a lot of things. One of the first things that we did is we created a task force within the organization, which consists primarily of human resources, some leadership team members, and some of our business unit leaders, so that we have input from all of the different areas. Because what happened was, Kiva, like many cannabis operators, we have a lot of people who just do, right? They see a challenge and they jump on it. And so we knew that if we left people to their own devices, everyone would go out and try and figure out how to manage this thing on their own, and we would all be doing different things. So we created a task force, and for the foreseeable future, we have calls every morning and every evening just to touch base on, are there any developments coming down the pipeline that we need to make decisions about? We immediately started writing a COVID-specific business continuity plan with different levels that would trigger different actions in the event of going from a level 1, which is heightened awareness, to a level 2, which is a shelter-in-place order or a stay-at-home order. We have pretty immediately, we asked all of our workers that were able to work remotely to start doing so. That's not an option for everyone, but for the people that it was an option for, we wanted that to happen right away. We also pulled our sales team from the field, so they're working primarily from home. And then specifically at our different businesses, at our operations unit, we did some re-engineering in terms of changing the ways that our packaging area was configured and our production area was configured, primarily so that people could still work, but they could be sitting 3 to 6 feet apart. We've made changes to our shifts so that they're not overlapping. As one shift is leaving, the other is arriving, and we've actually directed them to go out the back door when they're leaving and come in the front door when they're starting. We've expanded our break area so that people don't have to congregate too closely together. We've also given masks to anyone who wants to wear them, and we are implementing a temperature check program as well. Same with our distribution center. We have everyone working within the social distancing guidelines by the CDC. We are getting our drivers who are still out there interacting with dispensaries and whatnot. They've been fitted for the fit masks so that they can wear those as an extra precaution when they go out. We've armed them all with sanitation kits. We have an awesome safety manager who put together kits with Lysol wipes and hand sanitizer and gloves and things that they might need so that they can clean their work area and continue to work safely. And we're also doing temperature checks there. Communication, again, has been a huge focus because we know on certain levels of operation that we're doing all of these things, but our employees don't necessarily see everything that's going on behind the scenes. And this is a really scary time for them. And so we have really, really focused on trying to, again, create a communication plan so that they know where to go for information, when to expect the information, and that they're reassured that if anything changes, they'll be in the loop. So some of the components of that is we instituted daily stand downs. We call them safety stand downs. So that's the beginning of each shift. Our employees meet with their lead, and the lead gives them a brief on any changes for the day and reinforces our safety implementations. We do a daily email blast out to all employees of the organization. We've done that in English and Spanish, which are the 2 main languages, but just, hey guys, here's what happened today, here's what to expect for tomorrow, and we go by each business unit. So they know to expect that each night, and then if there's any changes, anything that's going to change for the next day, that they'll hear about it, which I think is good. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback about that. We use Slack within our organization. Not everyone has Slack, but we do have a specific channel that we've set aside specifically for outbound messages. We've asked our employees not to be putting memes in there or articles that they're finding, because of course there's a lot of conflicting information, but information that we want to share and information that we've vetted. We also implemented an emergency text message service, which we're excited about, not only for the COVID situation, but in the event that something else comes down the pipeline, we have the opportunity to go in and with the click of a button, send any urgent messages out via text or email or even voice message. We created a couple of documents that we've shared with all of our employees. We have a frequently asked question for employees and then a frequently asked question for people managers as well. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the training that we've done, but we're really trying to support the managers that are still working on site or even remotely that are responsible for guiding our employees through this. They have a huge burden to bear in addition to dealing with COVID at home and dealing with their own workload. They're trying to reassure and guide, other people that have never been in this situation before. We did a number of trainings. So we've trained all of our employees. Last week, our safety and training manager put together a really great presentation on, what are the facts of COVID? How is it spread? What are the symptoms? And what do you need to be doing to protect yourself and protect your family? There was an emphasis on all of the measures that we're taking, washing our hands, social distancing, but also a big emphasis on if you're sick, you need to stay home. We want to keep reiterating that message to people. There's not going to be disciplinary action if you don't come to work. We'll figure out how you're going to get paid for it, right? Sick time or vacation time and what's coming down the pipeline with the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. But you are the priority, you and your families. We want you to be safe. And then we also did additional trainings, like I said, for our people managers to kind of help them understand what they need to be looking for in their workforce in terms of symptoms, what they should do if they think that someone's sick and needs to be sent home, how to answer questions about, well, I'm not comfortable coming to work, but will I get paid if I decide to stay home? All the questions that I'm sure all of you are getting from employees who haven't navigated anything like this before, and they have so much information flying at them, they're not sure exactly who to trust. So I think that was really a really good thing that we could do as well. One of the proactive things that we did, and I think it was actually suggested on one of the CCIA risk management calls, is that we composed a letter from our president that we've put in the hands of all of our employees that states that they are an employee of Kiva, that Kiva is a cannabis manufacturer and distributor, and that has been decided to be an essential business in the state of California. And we've included numbers for the BCC as well as my phone number. So if they would get pulled over by the authorities and there was any consideration for wanting to confirm that they were an employee, that they could call me. So we did that not because it's required to any understanding that we have, but we wanted to be proactive. We were hearing we're hearing a lot of fear from people. Oh, the police are going around and knocking on doors to see if you're home. Don't know if that's true or an urban legend. The police are pulling people over on their way to work, and people were afraid. So just giving them this, hopefully it's not needed, but it's something that people have really appreciated and felt really good about having as well. We also have proactively started tracking attendance at an HR level so that, when the Families First Coronavirus Response Act is implemented, which I now hear is April 1st, I'm sure we'll talk about that, that we have some historical information to go off of. So we're trying to prepare ourselves for the flurry of activity that I'm sure is going to happen once that's implemented and as different provisions become clear. So yes, we've done a lot, and again, a lot in the means of communication. I think it's been the communication in and of itself is just reassuring to people. And, sometimes the daily emails that we send out are similar to the day before, right? There hasn't been a huge change since yesterday, but I think just knowing that they're going to get that and that they've heard from the company what's going on is a huge relief, and I think it's really helped with morale.
Terrific. Does anybody else have from their clients or anything? Thank you very much, Catherine, for that.
Sure.
Wesley, I think I'll just add just a couple points before I know we've got a lot to cover, but I would say that, for small businesses, there are three kind of buckets of primary risk based on coronavirus. Number one would be, changes in patterns of commerce, decreased sales because people are scared to go out, interruptions in the supply chain, and absenteeism. I think those are the three main concerns. And I think right now it's critical for every business owner to familiarize yourself with requirements under OSHA. And we're going to talk a little bit about OSHA later, but Cal OSHA has a great resource, the COVID-19 section of their website up. Go there and read through it. Every employer in California has a non-delegable duty to identify hazards in their workplace. And there are various statutes, and Cal OSHA is an agency you don't want to get into a battle with. Right now, I think as cases continue and absenteeism spikes and potentially transmission within the businesses spike, you have to be careful. And I think this is primarily important for public-facing businesses, the retailers, distributors, people who are have employees that are interacting with the public. Think about identifying those hazards and implementing what they call engineering controls, changing ventilation settings within the building, or putting up physical barriers, putting up additional hand washing stations, et cetera, to administrative controls. That would be flexible work from home or shifting times where people work, social distancing, that kind of thing. These are the kind of things that afterwards, when liability were to hit, if there was a lawsuit or an OSHA claim or whatever it may be, it's important to be able to show that you gave that kind of consideration. And then finally, documentation. Right now, you should be documenting everything. Write down everything. When you go into court, the best evidence you have is contemporaneous notes, your present thoughts, the things that happen as it's happening. That's the most probative for any kind of jury or administrative law judge or whatever to consider, not something you create after the fact. So document now. If you have over 10 employees, by the way, you're required under OSHA to report injuries that result in hospitalization or lost time from work on what's called an OSHA 300 log. That's a requirement you don't want to run afoul of. These are things where businesses a month ago were unlikely to encounter it, but these days you're very likely to encounter it. I would say.
And sorry to interject, but I'm imagining a lot of our operators. They're the head of HR too, right? They're the CEO. They're the key buyer in any number of things. What can be done so they're satisfying those, but at the same time, there's no extra work in the day. Extra time in the day. People are fighting. So, for somebody to sit down and even think about how to comply with an OSHA rule, I'm just imagining is overwhelming. Like, do you have any tips? If I was calling you and saying, Ian, give me a break, what can I do? How would you respond to that? Is there a way to shorthanded comply with that without throwing one more burden on operators?
Well, I think that's why, I recommend going to the state website, because they do have guidance documents, summaries, checklists, that kind of thing, which will be helpful. And then, obviously, use your normal business resources. Call your attorneys or safety specialists that you rely on day to day to help you. But it is critical to understand what your obligations are under OSHA these days.
So, I just want to mirror what Catherine has said, and probably a lot of people. The first thing we did was form a crisis management team, and it was really helpful because it was from each different part of the company, and everybody was hearing different things. It was very good for collecting information and then sharing. And then, in all honesty, employees like to know that there's somebody who's taking this serious enough to be dealing with it every day, and we have a daily call. And the other thing is we found out that the org chart wasn't set up for something like this. Like, who's responsible if a driver is pulled over in Santa Clara County? Who's responsible for some of these things, because they touch so many, but you don't want 4 people trying to deal with the same thing. So it was really helpful to come up and address those. So were there anybody else like to share in? Otherwise, I'd like to continue keep going down some of these. We have a lot of information. Okay. So, Lauren, I think in some ways the elephant in the room is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. All the operators have gotten tons of emails. Unfortunately, a lot of them link us to, a government site that's very dense, covers lots of information, and says things like, well, there's a 10-day waiting period, and you're thinking, 10 days from what? And what does that waiting period mean? And so forth. And I know we could easily spend an entire webinar just on the Families First Act, but can you demystify it in some way for operators, all the way down to, is it a good thing or a bad thing for people in the cannabis industry? I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Okay, so I would start by saying this is absolutely a great thing for cannabis companies. This is really was put into effect to protect our employees and make sure that our employees feel comfortable knowing they have a means of compensation if they need to stay home for illness, quarantine, or school closures. So what I would first like to highlight is the key elements. So the key elements is the FMLA expansion, the paid sick leave, the payroll tax credit, which we'll talk about cannabis's eligibility, and then the group health plan benefit mandate. So let's get started with the paid portion. We know that the Act will provide up to 2 weeks of sick leave. We see full pay if this is for the employee themselves, and 2/3 pay for family care if this is for illness, quarantine, or school closure related to COVID-19. The Act also provides up to 12 weeks of family and medical leave, and this is specifically for school closures. And of that 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave, we do know that 10 days, the first 10 days will be unpaid, and then the paid portion, the 10 weeks paid, will be covered at 2/3 of the employee's pay. And we also know that employees are eligible to use the 2 weeks of sick leave during the unpaid portion of the Family Medical Leave Act. What we also know is that this is effective for employers under 500 employees. And as Catherine mentioned, the effective date has changed. Prior communication appeared that the effective date would be April 2nd. It is now April 1st. And then also this is going to go into effect until December 31st, 2020. We also know that there appears to be no retroactive application. We have gotten a lot of questions if we need to retroactively apply this to employees who have already been out in regards to these circumstances related to COVID-19. It does not appear that that is the case. Some other questions we've got is how do we apply for an exemption? The Act does leave room for an exemption if you're under 50 employees, and complying would create a hardship on your business. We're waiting for the form to be released and other documentation from the Department of Labor. We have not gotten a lot of guidance yet, so at this point, it's kind of up to employers and agencies and advisors to kind of read the Act and understand it to the best of their abilities at this time. In regards to the tax credit, this is a huge question that we're getting because we know that cannabis, with the federal, with not being legal federally, we know that there's a lot of things that cannabis have not been eligible for. And so right now we don't have a 100% answer that I can give you. The outlook is not looking super positive, to be honest, and the reason is because we know that this payroll tax credit is going to come in the form of a federal tax deduction, and that's likely going to be subject to the limitations of 280E. So what we want to share with companies is to know that you absolutely do have to comply with this Act. There's been no industries that have been excluded. We do not know or at this time if that tax credit eligibility is going to be there.
And Lauren, I want you to know that we're receiving questions, and many of the questions are focused on exactly that. They're getting conflicting instructions. There's confusion on whether they can take the dollar for dollar credit now, later, how, so forth. So it speaks volumes that this is your business, and you're saying there's confusion. And I'm going to guess if we kicked it over to Ian, he's going to do that sort of classic lawyer maneuver and say, it depends. But is there something we can do to help people that are out there so they didn't say I took time out of my valuable time to listen to a webinar and they were able to tell me with regard to confusion that, yes, there's confusion out there? I mean, what would you recommend, Ian?
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer. But first of all, I'm not a tax attorney. But, my advice would be pay attention to public statements made by the federal and state agencies. There's going to be clarity or more clarity in the coming days. I agree with Lauren that it's unless there's a change to 280E or some other exemption that Congress enacts specifically related to cannabis businesses allowing to deduct payroll taxes. I mean, the law is the law in terms of 280E. It's a very, very broad section of the IRS code. But in terms of all those granular details, this is so new. We're going to have to wait for a week or two to see how this rolls out. And I wish I had a better answer.
Well, you look like a tax attorney, so I'm gonna take you at your word. Ian, let's just keep going because I really want to delve into some of the questions that we've asked internally, some of the things that people have emailed, me, or we have come up that are areas of confusion. And the reality is if we're to believe what we're reading, over the next few weeks, there's going to be huge numbers of our employees, all of our employees, as well as employers, perhaps people listening, are going to be exposed. Some are going to be diagnosed with COVID-19, and a whole lot of people are going to think they have it, but don't. And these all raise legal issues involving ADA, medical confidentiality, and other important, very important employment protections that don't go away just because of the coronavirus, as you said. So I want to go down a couple of examples to illustrate the balance between protecting employees who are at work, so the people who are there and coming in and say at a dispensary or manufacturing facility, but while still respecting the mandated worker protections and privacy. And of course, Catherine and Lauren and Dee Dee, this is all what you do as well. So feel free to chime in. But I'm just going to ask a couple of questions that I know have been coming up. Can an employer ask an employee if they are experiencing symptoms of COVID-19?
Right. So the EEOC has prepared updated guidance. I think the last guidance was issued on March 20, so just a few days old. This updates prior guidance that the EEOC after the H1N1 flu pandemic of 2009, which was not nearly as serious as COVID-19. But EEOC has designated COVID-19 as what they call a direct threat. And when something is a direct threat to the workplace, that means the employer has greater flexibility to do things that would otherwise violate the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or potentially other federal or statutes. Typically, the employer has obligations to provide reasonable accommodation for employees with disabilities, including people who are sick with COVID-19. Unless it's an undue hardship. Okay, so that's the legal standard. COVID-19 is a direct threat, meaning that employers have greater flexibility to do things like ask, "Are you sick?" And they should do it in a way that is consistent and is not subjective. It's an objective standard where they treat all employees the same. And what they can do is they ask questions like, do you have a cough? Do you have a fever? Do you have a sore throat? Things that would be relevant to potential infection with COVID-19. They can definitely ask that question.
Can employers require employees get tested? And I say you have to get tested.
So the EEOC has not specifically weighed in on this question, but the consensus within the legal industry is that yes, in a pandemic, they should be able to require employees to get tested, again, as long as they do it in a consistent manner that treats all employees the same, doesn't target specific types of employees or people from China, for example, or in a subjective manner.
And thank you. And Dee Dee, I'm looking at you. That sounds like that could be an expensive burden for employees and employers. Can you just address that testing cost?
Well, the testing cost is going to be borne completely by the insurance company. The national mandate at the moment is that testing is going to be covered at 100%. So again, it's not going to be an employee cost, but it will obviously end up in claims and therefore in premiums. But I would also say that we are hearing from the authorities that we do not want people to self-refer for testing. And so while the ability for an employer is to refer somebody to testing, the testing is being triaged by telemedicine and remote doctors, and access to testing is a real issue. So in normal times, it would be a totally different situation, but we've got a supply doesn't meet demand at the moment.
Thank you.
Again, they're asking all testing is to be directed by a doctor.
Can employers lawfully prohibit an employee from returning to work until 14 days has passed or whatever since they were exposed to the virus? I'm getting back to labor laws.
Yes, because of the designation of COVID-19 as a direct threat, employers can require an employee who has been exposed or has been diagnosed with COVID-19 to stay away from the workplace and self-isolate or quarantine for 14 days, and then upon return to work, have a doctor's test or a doctor's a note. Now, that can be difficult, and the EEOC recommends that employers be flexible with that requirement because of anticipated problems with the hospitals.
Yeah, and this is a real balance again. You want to protect those people who are there, and a lot of them are fearful that, hey, I'm out here, and if somebody's tested, or excuse me, if somebody has the symptoms or is at risk, I'd rather have them not here. But that person also has rights, as we've talked about. And so it's really, really, really important to balance those two. And then let's just talk about fear. Catherine has mentioned it. Most of the conversations people have, it is very, very, very understandable, particularly those who are not working at home, who are going in to be really concerned. Maybe they have an elderly parent that lives with them or somebody else that's at risk. So if an employee refuses to come to work, and refuse is probably the wrong word, says, hey, I can't come in because of fear, as opposed to symptoms or testing or anything else, what's the legal ramifications of that for what does the law say about that?
Yeah, so there's no specific statutory out, as it were, for the employee, meaning that under the ADA and the FMLA and other federal statutes, an employee cannot simply say, I'm afraid because of the exposure, therefore I'm not coming to work. They would not be covered because of that reason under those statutes. Now, they would be entitled to other benefits, PTO or other paid leave. And I don't know if Lauren and Catherine, you have other thoughts on sort of how that may work, but just an employee saying, I don't want to come to work because I'm afraid, that is not going to trigger, for example, benefits under Family First.
Okay, we just had a question. I'm just going to sort of segue over just for a second because I think it's very relevant. All of you can probably share, but Catherine, you as well, which is not sure how to make a plan for an entire team if one is diagnosed with COVID-19, and let's say in this particular case that are actually confirmed that they have it. Does everybody get quarantined and effectively shut down operations? As a retailer, this comes from a retailer, if any employee is diagnosed, chances are they've come in contact with all other staff in the last 14 days. What information can we share with us about this? Anyone?
I can just comment on. I think for this reason, it's going to be very important for employers to create contingency plans. I know depending on the environment, and you may be able to limit the work groups, like, for example, creating pods of different work groups working together. So we know if one person does become ill, that, this group potentially had contact versus the entire workforce. And then another thing we suggest is something that we're doing at work is creating those contingency plans to cross-train individuals in the event that we do have someone who does become ill, and this affects a entire department or area, then we know that we have a backup plan of someone else who is trained in that role and someone else who can jump in, so that business can continue, and there isn't a stoppage. Catherine, you might have more to add to that, being an operator, but.
Yeah, so we have such a varied workforce, as opposed to, not that a dispensary doesn't have a varied workforce, but you're in a smaller area with maybe fewer people. It really depends, and that's part of our business continuity plan that we've developed specifically for COVID. It depends on where that person would be working. Are they someone who is a remote worker and hasn't been in the office for 2 weeks? Okay, that's one thing. Or are they part of a greater packaging team? And when did they first find the symptoms, and who were they working with? So again, in this plan that we're putting together, we do have different levels depending on where the person would be, so that hopefully we're prepared for it. Could include closing down for a period of time, sanitation, remediation, of course, communicating to anyone who is in contact with this person. So there's a lot of a lot of different layers to it.
Can I add one thing, Wes?
Absolutely.
You know, despite the greater flexibility that employers do have in a pandemic setting, one thing that they do need to maintain is medical confidentiality of your employees. You know, if an individual is diagnosed, there should not be an announcement saying that John got COVID-19. You should keep the individual's name private and just say that an individual has been diagnosed. You should make an effort to advise that part of the work that, you know, that person reasonably would have come in contact with. But otherwise, it should be maintained, and you should maintain it in a separate, just like under your just like standard obligations. Maintain it in a separate medical file, not their standard personnel.
And, you know, to bring this from the general to the very personal, we just got that notice that somebody at my daughter's elementary school has tested positive, and they're not stating the name, but they're giving enough information. So a lot of these things that we are talking about, we might mention them as theoretical, but highly, highly, highly likely that we're going to be encountering people who have been diagnosed, come across diagnosed, and so forth. And so building those plans and getting ready. And I'll just say that our little question module on GoTo is about to melt down, and there's so many, and we're not going to get to them. So I kind of want to stress to all the members of the Risk Management Committee, and we're going to set up, I think, some mechanism so people can send in questions, and as much of those that we can address. We can't do it specifically. Ian can't give specific legal advice, but what we can do is try to find the information and distribute those via CCIA and others, but we'll certainly cover as many things as we can. You know, one of the most important things that Dee Dee, I can imagine is that we need to keep employers to be able to ensure that they're maintaining medical insurance for their people. And can you just talk about, you know, some of the issues surrounding that?
Absolutely. I know we're short on time, so if you would kind of give me a 1 or 2 minute, I'm going to shift over to the access to insurance, because clearly we want people to have coverage. So it's super important that companies really consider before they do a furlough, before they do a layoff, before they do a reduction in hours, how that impacts, again, access to benefits. And the key is that if an employee is maintained as an active employee and the premium is paid, all of the insurance companies nationwide are starting to flex their rules regarding actively at work. So employees that are furloughed but are still considered active are able to have continuity of medical benefits. One of the issues, of course, is who's paying the premium in that duration, and it needs to be decided upon, communicated, and then obviously there's an administration piece to it. We want to make sure that employers have understand that their portion of the premium is being deducted under a fiduciary, the employer's portion is a responsibility that they've taken on. Any dollars that they deduct from employee pay, they have to manage those dollars with a fiduciary responsibility. And it is key that if an employer is thinking of shutting down completely or is unable to come up with the funding to fund their medical insurance premiums, if you've received employee deductions for that medical insurance, you may be in a fiduciary problem. So I highly recommend that be part of the consideration. Talk to your insurance brokers and your attorneys about that. If you're going to, let me just take a peek at my notes. Again, plan for who's going to pay the premium, come up with a policy that you put into a pandemic section in your employee handbook, and then administration of that. Are you going to do it in advance? Are you going to do it during the furlough, or are you going to do it upon return? And how are you going to do it at that point if that's your choice? Are you going to do it in a lump sum? Are you going to break it out over a period of time? So absolutely, access to insurance is critical. The other thing I would say is that a lot of the states have reopened their exchanges, so and the individual marketplaces. So employees that are losing coverage because their employer is going out of business or closing down their medical plans or doing full layoffs where there's a termination of employment. In those situations, those individuals do have qualifying events to get into individual policies with subsidies or onto Medicaid, as well as if you have family and friends who are uninsured at this time, they have access to insurance on a guaranteed basis with pre-existing conditions covered. And that's opening up a lot, I believe, on April 1. So please spread the word that we do have access to care and coverage for care, and the insurance industry is really engaged with regulators and public health officials on that.
And since so much of this is almost personalized, wouldn't you recommend, like, this is your job, right? So if I'm an operator and I'm going through you or someone like you, wouldn't you just recommend, and isn't it the right thing to pick up the phone and they call you and say, help me, right? I have X number of employees. Can you help me with this? Give me very specific 1, 2, 3, and then to go from there. And since everybody has insurance, they got it from a company or a broker or somebody to help them, there are resources there. And Lauren, that's the same thing with you. Everybody has payroll in some form or another and in various forms. And so again, it's calling up and saying, help me. People are asking questions, and all the way through. So we want to provide more actionable thing than just, hey, call your advisors. But we also don't want to skip over that. Call everybody who you deal with in this and say, what do you have for me? You're certainly not going to be the first person. And, speaking frankly, that's their job and that's their role. And that's why we work with them. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, yes. And can I add something to that, Wesley? We know that with Families First Coronavirus Response Act, we know that it's kind of a catch-22 for cannabis right now, as we don't know about eligibility for the tax credit. But I would, ask that operators still reach out to their payroll providers to track any time off that they're providing to their employees in regards to this new act, because we want to be prepared in the event that cannabis is eligible for the credits, and that, as we continue to advocate for this, that, we win, and then we have the documentation and the hours and the compensation that we provided to our employees in response to this new federal mandate.
Thank you very much. Ian, and there's so much to cover, and many of these questions that are coming in are important. We're not going to get to them. And so what I want to do again is we'll encourage the risk management committee to take all the questions that come in and figure out how to address them through materials and so forth. Some of these are so relevant. There's employers out there who say, I've got somebody who's over 65, or maybe they have underlying health conditions. Are they okay coming in and not getting benefits?
Right. Yeah. So that's a great question. So when an employee voluntarily discloses, for example, some underlying health condition or a concern, maybe they're on immunosuppressive therapy for some reason, or they have other compromise. This is the kind of thing where the employer does have an obligation to engage in an interactive discussion with the employee to determine what are the increased risks of hazardous work conditions, whether or not you can use some of what those administrative controls, for example, flexible time or remote work, or environmental controls, barriers around the person, whatever it may be. So long as it's not unduly burdensome for the employer, you may have an obligation to do that. And that's the right thing to do for the employee. But this is a thing that we're all going to start seeing in our workplace.
All right. Well, then that's excellent. So we're going to run out of time, and one of the things that I want to touch on is actually probably two things. One is things are changing. Just when you hear something else changes. While we've been on this webinar, I have received a copy of a County of Santa Cruz update, and they're saying that basically curbside sales are to be discontinued immediately. However, in-store sales may resume. So it's almost the exact opposite of what we've all been saying this last couple of days, which is go to curbside sales, you can request permission. There's very specific ways through the BCC. They've been incredibly responsive on that. And here we go, and we see something is changing in one jurisdiction. Now, I can easily imagine stakeholders getting in touch with the county and finding that being reversed in some way. So I think this is just one of those things where we buckle in, do your best, collect information. It's one of the reasons. And if you're a smaller operator, there's no reason that you can't set up your own crisis management team with other peers. I've been speaking on a regular basis with other distributors and manufacturers, just asking them, what are they finding out? And, you know, Catherine, I'm sure you're doing the same thing. We're sharing. These are all industry issues. They're not company-specific issues. They're industry issues. The more that we share, the more we keep the supply chain and access going, which is why we're here. And I do now want to touch on one sort of last thing and tee up each of the panelists to talk about. It has to do with advocacy. Because when at the beginning we opened up and we said, you know, hey, it's great, we're an essential business. In fact, it's more than great. Otherwise, this would probably be a very different webinar. That didn't come about by chance. That came out because stakeholders, industry associations, and so many people reacted very quickly to say, we need to be treated like the industry we are. We cannot cut off access. And we were successful. That isn't our only fight. And now is the time to stand up and fight for continued access of this incredible plant. Just as we did with the hysteria surrounding vaping, we can't let COVID-19 be an excuse for taking a step backward for access to cannabis. So what I would like is each of our panelists, we'll start with Catherine, to talk about something beyond now or essential, because while we have to keep fighting that, what thing do you feel we should be advocating for? And then the last person is I'm going to turn it over back to Josh, the CCIA, who's going to be listening to these, and he can give us advice about how we can take these wants and desires and turn them into actions. Catherine?
Oh, that's a tough one. With all the other things I've been thinking about, I don't know that I was prepared to answer that question. One of the first things, I guess, that comes to mind, because we were talking about the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, is, you know, I would like for cannabis employers to be eligible for that tax break. So that would be a great thing to continue to focus on.
Excellent. Ian?
I want to answer that. If I can say one thing, Wes, just I think it's important for everyone to understand that despite the state order about essential services, all of the cannabis regulations still apply to your business. So, you know, whether it's curbside delivery or contactless delivery or other, you know, modifications that you think are necessary, you need to apply to the BCC, send that email to the BCC and call them, but also get authority from your local permitting jurisdiction. And until we have clarity on these competing city, county, and state orders, I think there's going to be a continuing confusion on that. With regard to advocacy, I'm just going to kind of repeat what the Risk Management Committee has been saying over the last 3 years or so, which is important now more than ever, which is that the cannabis industry needs to engage in proactive risk management, not reactive risk management. What we're doing here today is reactive risk management, responding to something that was unforeseen. You should get familiar with the principles of ERP, enterprise risk management. You should engage in what-if discussions with your team. What if this happens? What if that happens? And you should engage in serious insurance risk management by talking to your brokers about the cover that's available to you in the event of this type of emergency. That would be my advice.
Edie?
So in terms of advocacy, I really feel as though this is a federal opportunity, that if we have this many jurisdictions considering cannabis an essential business, that it potentially is the time to really press that at the federal level and have an opportunity, again, for those tax credits through the Families First to feed down to cannabis businesses because they've been deemed essential. I want to take a quick moment and touch on some of the handouts that we have posted on the CCIA COVID website. I'm going to go ahead and just make it known that there are some employer and some employee-facing materials that really detail out access to care and how to get coverage and access to services during this pandemic. And with that, I've passed.
All right, and Lauren.
I have to, add on to Catherine's comment that, the tax credit is absolutely something we need to advocate for, and essentially just legal federalization, because at this point, cannabis is being an essential business. We're here to continue to serve, patients and people who truly rely on this plant. And at this point, we just cannot continue to keep having to ask, is cannabis included? When cannabis has proven over and over again that we're essential, and that they need to have access to these programs to keep their doors open and to keep their employees healthy and safe.
I think that's really well said. We really cannot let this crisis derail all of the other things that could impede the sort of access to this plant. And then I have my own that I'd like to share, which is, hopefully all of you know that the IRS, the Franchise Tax Board, the EDD, and even the CDTFA have set up programs where you can defer filing, defer fees, and so many things like that. So those can be redirected to your business. Those can be redirected to retaining employees. One group of potentially very significant fees that touches every single cannabis operator is our licensing fees. Now, I'm not talking about taxes. I'm talking about our fees. Those are paid a year in advance. They're potentially significant. And for people that are also a manufacturer and a distributor, they pay both of those. And so what I believe in the ask, and the CCIA is working on this. This is an industry issue. It affects ancillary businesses because they depend on their clients being in business. Patients depend. And I think we should do an industry ask to the state, all the regulatory agencies, to the state, and say, let us redirect those fees to retaining our employees. And I think that that's something, and now I want to do is turn it over to Josh, so these just aren't words, but we can turn these things into actions. The other thing is I really want to thank our panelists. Besides being on here for an hour, we've been speaking an hour or two every day on how to create materials and share with the industry. And as you can see, these are all people that have day jobs. And so unfortunately, there's not a job classification for professional webinar. Maybe there will be for now. And so I really want to thank, each and every one of them. And Josh, I hope you're on. We'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Wes, and thanks everyone for participating today. This has all been very helpful for our operators, for our employers. I greatly appreciate all the work that's being done in the Risk Management Committee and beyond. I will be echoing a lot of what other folks said here, but the main point I want to get across is no gifts are handed to the cannabis industry ever. We have to fight for every single ask that we make. CCIA has been in existence now for 7 years. We are politically savvy. Yes, we are very engaged in the process. We would not have been classified as essential businesses if CCIA had not put a letter into the governor the day after he made his initial press conference announcement about shelter in place and trying to get folks to stay home. We acted immediately, and this is something that's going to happen a lot during crises. We put a letter together. We reached out to our membership and beyond to send in your logo, and in a matter of 5 hours, we got 70 logos onto a letter that immediately went to the governor's office, asking that any executive order classify cannabis operators as essential, and not just retail operators, but the entire supply chain, which is what happened. That took a lot of work, but that is what we do. We're now in a place where we're passing a $2 trillion financial package to help folks that have been affected by the coronavirus. We won't see those funds in California because cannabis is a Schedule I drug. So this is where we need as much input. We need you to get involved in the committees. We need you to be providing information so we can create good policy. And with that, I mean, we need to know what the asks are. What are solutions to the problem that folks are going to be dealing with, not just today, but months down the road? And that's what we need to activate in right now. We're already starting to see, and I think Wes touched on this, the licensing fees are starting to pile up for folks. They need to, submit their payments, but they're having trouble getting inspectors to their facilities. There are many challenges that are on the horizon that we need your input on. We have a COVID-19 task force that is meeting every day, putting together what our asks are going to be from the administration and from the regulatory bodies. So when I say pay attention to those emails daily, I mean that. We're really trying to provide as much real-time information and get feedback. We need a broad coalition of folks to continue these fights so that we're not having to be reactive. I think we're all getting very tired of being in these reactive moments, but we're learning a lot. And we're putting together better business plans and structures the whole way through. So through each crisis, I'd like to believe we're becoming a stronger industry. But ultimately, we need your expertise to educate us on what good policy is going to look like and what are solutions to the problems that we're going to be facing not only in this crisis, but beyond. So now is the time, get engaged. You can reach out to me directly, Josh at cacannabisindustry.org. You can reach out to Justin, it's the same, Justin at cacannabisindustry.org. But we need to hear from you to make sure we're on the right track, and that way we can engage you further. We don't know what the issues are until you bring them to us. So with that, I send it back to you, Wes. Thank you all for participating. This has been great.
Well, thank you very much, Josh. And I'm just going to mirror my email is wes@mammoth.org. If there's anything that I can do that helps the industry, helps you, please reach out. I'm sure all the panelists feel the same. And the other thing is if you came into this late or there's other people that you think would benefit from this, I believe CCIA will be having the link up almost immediately to watch the recording. So I think that's it. I think we'll turn it back over to Justin, and I really appreciate everybody inviting us into your homes today.
Awesome. Yeah, just wanted to say thank you, Wes, and thank you to all the panelists. Similar to what Josh said, this is how the knowledge really happens in CCIA is through these committees, through people that are doing this every day, and then that gets funneled up into leadership, and really makes a difference in terms of what's happening out there. So if you'd like to get involved, please reach out to me. My email is just my first name, Justin at cacannabisindustry.org, and everybody on the call will be receiving a follow-up email as well with the documents that were attached in the handout section. I know a couple of people mentioned trouble opening it, so we will be sending it to you individually. And yeah, thank you for everybody joining on. We will be doing a series of webinars over the next month or two, so keep an eye out in your emails for that. I know that next one will be revolving around taxes, and that'll be next Wednesday. So definitely check the website and check those emails. And thank you everybody for calling in, and thanks for the panelists. And I think we're done. All right, thank you everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.